Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Sharing Symposium Session 1, Florida's Journey to Become Age-Friendly. My name is Laura Cantwell. I am with AARP Florida and lead our work that we do around livable communities. Just as some housekeeping before we start, we're going to be sharing this webinar. We're going to have some interactive pieces to it. So take a minute right now to see if you have a cell phone available or another device that you can use so that we can do some interactive polling as we move along. And to get everybody started, here is a how-to do. We're using Poll Everybody, and you can really easily do this on your cell phone or on your computer. Just go to pollev.com. When it asks for a username, make sure to put in the word friendly. So I'm going to pause a minute and give everybody a chance to do that. And just to repeat, you go to pollev.com and your username will be the word friendly. All right. So as we wait for everyone to get on board, I'm going to start with our first question just to get a sense of where we're all from. So what community are you joining us from today? This can be a city, a town, a neighborhood, a county, how you define your community. Great. So we have somebody from Miami-Dade, Coral Springs, St. Pete, Martin County, Tallahassee, Gainesville, Northeast Florida. So all over the state, keep them coming. Brevard, another Tallahassee, Marion, St. Pete. All right, I'll give it just another minute, but it is good to see so many folks from across the state, all the way from the Panhandle to Miami, Jacksonville, Orlando, middle of the state, Sarasota. And I know we have a lot of responses coming in because mine hasn't even shown up yet. Broward, Gainesville, awesome. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. I just wanted to make sure we were all a little bit comfortable with using this. For those that just joined, we are going to be using this interactive tool throughout the session today. It is, and there's mine, Safety Harbor. It is pollev.com and your username is friendly. So make sure you get that going. Once you have registered in Poll Everywhere, all you have to do is pull up that page for the rest of the session today, and you can put in your remarks as we're moving forward. So it looks like everybody has this. Most of you are getting this. I'll remind you how to do it again when we get to our next question. But today, I want to start off by saying who our panelists are that joining us today. We have Jeff Johnson, who is the State Director for AARP Florida, Secretary Richard Prudom from the Florida Department of Elder Affairs, myself, and Kathy Black, who is working with us at AARP and is a leader, as you all know, in the age-friendly work. So again, thank you for joining us today. And I'm going to turn over the session to Jeff Johnson to give us a little bit of background on age-friendly. So Jeff, thank you so much.
Thanks, Laura, and good morning to everybody. Great to see so many folks on and from all over the state. Appreciate the opportunity to talk a little bit about age-friendly. And I think it's important just at the start to raise the question, what is this about? Why are we doing this? And I think it comes, at least from AARP's perspective, from research we've done that over the last several years has been really consistent. It shows that really about 80% of adults and especially those 50 and over, are interested in aging in place and living the rest of their life in the community they're currently in. And as a Floridian, I was initially surprised by that because for many years, Florida has worked under the operating principle that people come here from somewhere else when they're tired of the community that they've lived their life in. Whether that's a sign that people are choosing to come to Florida earlier in their lives, or that people are changing the way they think about how they live the second act of their lives. We don't really know, but I will tell you that we've done similar research that's specifically for Florida, and it's, again, pretty consistent. Most people want to live in the community they're currently in for the rest of their days. And so then that makes it really important for us to think about, as community planners, as local leaders, just as citizens, what is it about our community that will either help or hinder people from being able to stay here for the rest of their lives? You can go ahead and go on to the next one, Laura. Great. And I think that the one of the things that Secretary Prudom and Dr. Black and I have all talked about over time is that while the age-friendly network, the international construct that the World Health Organization has set up, is really valuable, one of the things that may be a bit of a misnomer or a confusion is the idea that perhaps this is really just about older adults. And that's not really true, because the things that are interesting, the things that are important for people who want to age in place, live their whole lives in one place, are important across the age spectrum. So research that's we've done in the last couple of years has shown that whether you're a millennial or whether you're a baby boomer, you're going to want a lot of the same things. You're going to want walkable mixed use neighborhoods. You want to be able to get to the store. You want to be able to have parks that are easy to get to and fun to enjoy. You're going to want to make sure that the roads are maintained well. You're going to want to make sure that you have the opportunity to take advantage of the different things that are available in a community. And so that's something to remember as we go through this work, that while we call it age friendly, frankly, the Department of Elder Affairs, I think, had a name that was perhaps more apt when they began work in the similar area probably decades ago now, communities for a lifetime. That what we're looking at are communities that are great for people of any age, whether you are a toddler or whether you are 102. Let's go on to the next one. And this is really just a quick description of what we've sort of settled on as the essentials of what makes a community a great one for all ages, or a livable community. So a livable community is one that's safe and secure. It's got affordable and appropriate housing and transportation options. It has supportive community features and services. It's one that, once in place, you can use the resources and enhance personal independence, allow residents to age in place, and foster resident engagement in the community's civic, economic, and social life. And so that's the North Star that we've been using at AARP. And again, we have been using the framework that the World Health Organization has for age-friendly states and communities. Let me go ahead and show you and talk a little bit about what the major domains are in an age-friendly network according to the World Health Organization. And there are 8 domains that some of you know by heart and some of you may be hearing for the first time, but when you stop and think about what makes a community a really good one for people of all ages, it starts with housing and a decent place to live, one that is affordable. And affordable housing certainly is an issue that we've talked about a lot in Florida, again, across all ages, but also one that's accessible. If you have a home that perhaps you can afford, but it's not one that is safe from storms, or it's not one that's safe from trips and falls, ones that require a lot of stairs to get up that may be more difficult to navigate as you age, or has other features that just don't lend themselves to, say, having a wheelchair that can't get through the door. Those are sorts of things that we need to think about as we build housing and rehab housing in our community. The public spaces are really important, and we think about parks. And a lot of times parks are things that we think about primarily for little kids. I know for those of us who have been parents of young children, parks are a godsend because it's a place where they can run off energy. And they are free, which is, of course, hugely helpful for people across the economic spectrum. What we don't think about is how are those parks valuable for people of all ages? And so we can make them more or less so by the way we program them, the activities that happen there, as well as the way we physically structure them. Are there benches? Is there shade? Are there things that make it an attractive place, not only for those parents looking to run off the energy in their small children, but also for people across the age spectrum? And so we think about parks parks, and in Florida have done a lot of work with the Parks and Rec Association of the state. Transportation is another major issue that Floridians have talked about for years, and particularly the range of options of transportation. We all know that for many people, driving is the primary means of getting from point A to point B, but it may not be the best way to get there for the entire lifespan. And so thinking about how people can navigate their community across a spectrum of ways and have options, whether it is, as one of the earlier slides pointed out, a walkable community where you can walk to a lot of the things that you want, or you can bike, or you can take public transportation or other transportation options. Those are really important. Those three are really the physical dimensions of an age-friendly community, of a livable community, but they're not the only ones. So we also talk about social participation. If it can be a beautiful place, but if there's nothing fun to do there, it's not a place you're going to want to spend the rest of your life in. And similarly, one of the things that I think, especially in America, we value is the ability to participate civically. And while a lot of times we lump together the economic participation of work in that, it also is about being able to show up as a resident and have your voice heard, and being able to volunteer in the community and those sorts of things. I also think one of the things that in Florida you see differently in different parts of the state is the level of respect and social inclusion. And while certainly we have talked a lot in America over the last couple of years, especially about how we bridge the divides that we have as a nation, and how we address issues around racism and sexism, one of the things that seldom gets talked about is ageism. And so one of the things that is one of the domains of livability is it a place where, regardless of your age, you're welcome? And I think that there are places around the state where you see where the hot new thing happens, the restaurant opens up, or a great activity happens at a new park, and you see people across the age spectrum, and everybody's okay with that. I think that that's a really important and often overlooked thing. One of the essentials that is among the 8 domains is a vibrant health system, and one that can really help people continue to thrive as they age by having good health care available and ways to stay healthy. And then the thing that when we first heard about this World Health Organization framework, I thought, well, this is probably less of an issue here, is communication and information. And I couldn't have been more wrong, because the reality is all of those things may be present in your community right now, but if you don't know about them, if you don't know how to access them, then they're no good to you. And so that ability to be able to communicate with people across a range of technologies and communication modalities is really important. Before we move on, I also just wanted to flag, there's a little box on the screen, hopefully you can see, that highlights some other areas. So while these 8 domains are the ones that the World Health Organization offers up, and they're pretty comprehensive, there are communities that have said, hey, wait a second, when we talk to our residents about what's important to them about making a community livable, some other issues come up. And so you'll hear things like public safety, and you'll hear things like how do we weather storms here in Florida? What is our resilience plan for climate change? How do we deal with disasters? Those sorts of topics are ones that you might be able to fit into the 8 domains, but some communities have chosen to say, this is so important to our residents that we think is really important to be able to plan around that as a separate domain. And certainly that's wonderful. I think that that's being responsive to your community, which is really important. We can go on to the next slide now. So about 2012 was when here in Florida, we started to work on this. It was really 2015 before the first communities began to join Sarasota County. Congrats to you all. We now have grown to 41 communities in Florida, and actually there's another 1 or 2 that are likely to join in the next few months. There wasn't initially a plan for an entire state to join until states started asking. And so Florida became the 4th state in the country, there are now 6, that have said at the state level that we want to be an age-friendly community. And nationwide, you'll see there are more than 500, we're closing in on 600 communities that have raised their hand to say, we want to be a part of this age-friendly network. So what does that mean? Let's go on to the next slide. I think a lot of times when you talk with especially elected officials or other governmental leaders, they will, and actually this happens a lot when you talk with chambers of commerce, they will hear this and think, okay, this is a certification program. We're going to jump through some hoops. We're going to fill out a really long application. We're going to have to take a test maybe or have site visit. Then we're going to get a big plaque. We're going to put it on our wall and we're going to be able to say we're age friendly. That is not really what this process is designed for. It is really one that is focused on continuous improvement. And so rather than something that has a huge lift to get into and then no follow-up steps, which frankly we have seen in other programs over the years, this is really designed to be an initiative in which people are not saying we're already age friendly, but we want to continue to be as age friendly as we can by growing, by adjusting the way we do things. And so the cycle is set up in order to help communities that want to do that. So it's generally a 5-year cycle. You enroll, and the first thing you do is listen to your community. And we have a number of, of the 41 that have been through, have enrolled in the process. Most of them have gone through the initial piece of whether it's conducting a survey or doing listening sessions or doing a mix of those or other ways of assessing what is it that residents think are real assets for aging in place in this community, and what are the opportunities. And so they take that information and develop an action plan, and then you implement the action plan, and then you go back at the end of the cycle to look at what worked, what didn't, what still needs continued work, and then how do we re-up and do this whole process again. Happy to say that Sarasota County and the town of Cutler Bay have already completed this 5-year cycle and re-upped for a second go round. And that's the intent, that this is again about continuous improvement, not about reaching a baseline level and calling it a day. So it's wonderful that because of the diversity of the state of Florida and because of the different time periods in which communities enrolled in the age-friendly process, we have folks at all different phases here, and I think that that's really valuable. Let's go ahead and go on to the next one, because I think, again, to the diversity of approach, we have folks who have done very different things. So the city of St. Petersburg, which was one of the earlier ones, has a really wide range of stakeholders who have had input into the action plan and began, again, not only with surveys, but by holding listening sessions in different parts of the city in order to capture qualitative data, if you will, firsthand information from residents about what was working and what wasn't in their community. I think the Miami-Dade Age-Friendly Initiative is one of the first. It actually started with a private grant from Pfizer a number of years ago. And one of the things that they've been a really good example of is how they, as a county, have engaged different municipalities within that huge county in the process. I think there are about 12 municipalities that are also in the age-friendly process, and they coordinate and work together on who's doing what and how we can learn from each other. You're going to hear more later in the series from a couple of others. So Walton County, which is up here, is one that has really sprung from the health department. And one of the things that has been really fascinating that Florida has been a leader on has been connecting the age-friendly community effort with our public health system. And so the Age-Friendly Public Health Initiative, in conjunction with the Department of Health, has really allowed us to look at this in an even different approach. And so in Walton County, it's the health improvement plan that has really been a basis for the age-friendly work in that area. And then Cape Canaveral has taken a different approach. It's out of their work on resiliency that the action plan has come from. And I think that that's, especially here in Florida, a really important lens that they have been a real exemplar on. We can go on. I think maybe this is my last point, you'll be happy to hear. I think that that last point is this: when you hear that you can come at it from this way or that way or this other way, it can be tempting to say, okay, so age-friendly is just something you can kind of take the work you're already doing and call it age-friendly. And it'll fit those domains and you're good. And I would argue that that would be a false way to go about it and a limited way to go about it, because the reality is there are discussions on all of these topics happening already, all the time. And certainly over the last 18 months, as we've talked and worked through a pandemic that continues, as we've addressed in a new way issues of systemic racism, as we've dealt with any number of other major challenges that our communities face, you could approach them from an age-friendly perspective, but most people don't. And I think that the value of being in the age-friendly network, the value of focusing on this age-friendly process, is it forces us to bring age into the conversation. When we talk about climate change, when we talk about resilience, when we talk about race, when we talk about pandemics, when we talk about anything else that a community is going to talk about, it's important to talk about age as well, especially here in Florida, given our demographics. I think the age-friendly process and the age-friendly network gives an intent for us to do that everywhere, and a community of people across the state and really across the country that we can bounce ideas off of and learn from. So that's the general overview that I wanted to leave with you. I know I covered a lot in a very short period of time, but never fear, because we're going to be doing these sharing symposia over the next couple of weeks and months, and I think you're going to have a lot of opportunities to dig in even more. Thanks so much, Laura. I appreciate the opportunity to do this.
Thank you so much, Jeff. That was a lot of information to go over, and thank you for really painting a picture of this journey that we've been on with age-friendly communities. This would have been our in-person sharing symposium. I know many of you have been joining us over the years. We were hoping to have a big one last year, but we've all adjusted, and I really appreciate you guys joining us on this series. For those of you that are just joining us, we're hearing from Jeff Johnson about the age-friendly journey. And now we're going to hear from Secretary Richard Prudom with the Department of Elder Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us today, Secretary.
Thanks, Laura. It's great to be here. And obviously, thanks to Jeff for providing a really good framework for the discussion today about age-friendly and Florida's obviously journey, which continues. And actually, I noticed on the graphic there about submitting an action plan, and we have just submitted our action plan yesterday. So that'll be literally hot off the press for people to read over this long weekend. But I want to obviously go back, take things a bit to like a 50,000-foot level and talk really about those demographics and really that are specific to Florida, and really has caused us not concern, but making sure that we address the needs of those older adults, and why we embarked on this age-friendly many years ago. But you know, I think we recognize that Florida is the third most populous state. We have about 21 million people here. 6 million of those are 60 and older. And to put that into perspective, that population of 6 million over 60 outnumbers the senior populations of 17 other states combined, but also outnumbers the total population combined of Alaska, North Dakota, South Dakota, Vermont, Wyoming, and the District of Columbia. So we have a lot of old adults here. 100 years ago, when the Spanish flu was killing millions of people across the globe, the average life expectancy in the US was 54. And today it is 78.5. However, I did hear because of COVID, they've actually revised that down a year. So it just shows you what the power of a pandemic can do to life expectancy. But regardless, people are living longer because, 20th century medicine did successfully contain those infectious diseases. And as we know, the world of medicine is doing the same with the coronavirus. But, obviously, we recognize even though our life expectancy has increased significantly, there are growing prominence of chronic illnesses. And we know about dementia, obviously, osteoporosis, heart disease, and stroke. But also there are associated disabilities. And as we know, long-term care is the help that's needed to cope when those disabilities impair our capacity to perform the basic tasks of everyday life. By 2030, that 60-plus population is going to increase to about 7.5 million, which is an increase of more than 35%, and that's in a little less than 10 years. And unfortunately, and Jeff alluded to this, was with that increase comes an ever-growing rhetoric describing the impact on this larger aging culture in our nation as a silver tsunami. And, that term unfortunately equates the increases, to older adults as like an economic and healthcare crisis. And it's been fueled by concerns about chronic illnesses and long-term care. but also made worse by the fact that COVID-19 has had a disproportionate impact on older adults. And I think we recognize, yeah, there are challenges in promoting the health and well-being of this growing and increasingly diverse older adult population. But an important part of that challenge is going to be the societal stigma and negative stereotypes about aging, including beliefs that all older adults are frail and lonely and depressed and physically and mentally impaired. But, we all recognize, especially as older adults, aging is an experience everyone embraces as a reward, really, of a life of living and working along with and with our communities. It's also a period of growth, development, and increasingly subjective well-being despite physical challenges. But still counterintuitively, ageism persists in the culture, despite the very aging of our culture. However, I think we recognize, that the embedded assumptions that older adults are an inevitable drain on healthcare resources, the economy in general, is incorrect. Floridians are staying employed longer, earning wages, spending more money, generating tax revenue, and producing economic value for an extended period of time. I think most people agree that age discrimination is wrong and disrespectful. If organizations and companies, deride, do not hire, or dismiss older adults because of their age, that's prejudice. But for some reason, it doesn't, invoke the anger that other biases do, and I think that's inherently wrong, especially if communities are to thrive. We will never be a single race or gender, but all of us strive to one day be old and healthy. Back to the economic impact, I think AARP actually did a great study, one of many great studies they do. In 2017, 40% of the population were people 50 and over. But the economic contribution of those individuals accounted for like 54% of the gross domestic product of the state, about $478 billion. And that is significant. And then economists refer to this as the longevity economy. The bottom line is that older Americans, older Floridians, are more financially capable and have the largest percentage of discretionary spending. And I think as well, we recognize that the elder aging population has changed the nature of the consumer market for goods and services across all these sectors: technology, travel, restaurants, entertainment, and retail. And I think across all these industries, and employers and entrepreneurs who understand the interests and needs of aging populations, they're the ones that are poised for success because they recognize that this is largely an untapped market. And as we continue to reopen our communities coming out of the pandemic, this will also be the case. So anyway, while there are challenges in promoting the health and well-being, again, of the population, the changing demographics also present an opportunity for us, the communities, all of us, to use social and technological ingenuity to develop solutions for our changing needs that can move us all forward. And I mean that together. I think that's very important. And I think, before the pandemic, we recognize that communities that fare best will be those that both tackle the challenges, but also embrace the positive possibilities that an aging population creates, and essentially becoming livable communities. And obviously that's the focus of our Age-Friendly initiative. And as we know, the amenities of a livable community help to maximize the independence and quality of life of older adults, but also enhancing the economic, civic, and social vitality of the community. But I think it's also critically important to engage all community members as partners, and challenge them to take a more proactive role in the well-being of the older adults in their community. And, indeed, I think we need to pay close attention to the needs, aspirations, and concerns of the older adult population, especially in light of the disproportionate impact of COVID-19, while also acknowledging the important role they play in the economic engine of the state. And I think we recognize there are both societal and economic benefits to be gained from such careful consideration. And that is really why one of the most important initiatives we are working on right now is collaborating with AARP to make Florida an age-friendly state. And when Governor DeSantis embraced the age-friendly designation 2 years ago, he envisioned a Florida where older adults, and indeed all Floridians, will thrive in livable communities, where we will not only live, but live well and age well. And, coordinating and aligning the age-friendly into a statewide movement really represented the natural progression of grassroots work that started over 20 years ago with the introduction of communities for a lifetime. And you heard, obviously, Jeff talk about that. And, the strength of the commitment to make Florida age-friendly comes from that foundational work led by those many communities that have embarked on that initiative. And to date, 41 communities, 29 cities, villages, and towns, and 12 counties have shown that commitment by joining the Age-Friendly Network. And obviously, those communities continue to build on the momentum. But as Jeff also said, others will be joining them this year as we work to helping Florida fulfill our mission to be a greater age-friendly state and a greater livable Florida. But I think it's also important to note that even though we're looking at a state designation here, that the age-friendly designation is really a process that is and always will be community initiated and community driven. Neither the state or AARP will be dictating how communities will become age-friendly or a community, or a livable community. We're going to be working with communities to ensure they achieve the goals that are relevant and specific to the needs of that community. We'll facilitate, we'll encourage, we'll reassure, but ultimately, I think success lies with the community. In that regard, it really is a true grassroots effort. Successful livable communities essentially focus on the social determinants of health, and I think we all have heard a lot about them during the last 16, 17 months of the pandemic. And really, those social determinants are the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, and age. And as Jeff says, the age-friendly model to groups those social determinants into those 8 age-friendly domains. And you saw the slide on that earlier on. But, the social determinants include factors like employment, economic security, access to nutrition, appropriate and affordable housing, transportation options, safe streets, and as Jeff said, protection against natural disasters, which is obviously very important in this state, but also protection from abuse, neglect, and exploitation. The critical importance of social support networks, combating loneliness, depression, and I think more than ever, access to personalized healthcare. But those social determinants, are really more than a definition or a scholarly acronym. It becomes an individual perception. It's also public awareness. I think when people have the opportunity to make choices that allow them to live a long and healthy life, regardless of their income, educational background, they are most likely to stay healthy. So really, those social determinants, I think, become the overall well-being and behavioral health of each person. And I think that's become sort of more important and more critical as we come out of the pandemic. The impact of COVID is going to reverberate for many years across ages and cultures. With obviously we know it brought tremendous adversity, but we have and are gaining critical knowledges as communities. More specific, like I said, the vital significance of mental health and well-being, as well as the access to person-centered mental and physical health care. But COVID shook the foundation of those social determinants. It disrupted those core services necessary to provide all older adults with access to socialization, the senior centers, the health centers, transportation to visit one another, and other fundamental aspects of a quality life. That disruption, changed the very focus of all communities that really had to meet the most immediate needs. But to basically survive. But surviving, I think, as we know, is not thriving. So, while the pandemic has reshaped communities, it also has provided numerous opportunities for rebuilding and reorganization at all levels, and has really proffered the ability for communities to see the benefits of new and expanded technology with the advent of new programs and improved services. And I think, the federal government has been really responsive in sort of providing significant funding through the Families First Act, through the CARES Act, and now through the American Rescue Plan Act, which has provided significant funding for the states to give to communities to rebuild. And, and I think this is a perfect opportunity in time to really build on the age-friendly initiative, because now we have a new awareness of the importance of the social determinants. And now we have funding to build communities that reflect those social determinants in the most appropriate way. And so it's not so much an opportunity. I think we have an obligation and a responsibility to rebuild and restructure communities that reflect the needs of all citizens to live and live well. So it really just all to say this has given us a renewed vigor to rebuild and reorganize and create stronger relationships and partnerships with all community individuals interested in developing more livable communities. So I'm excited about that opportunity, and I think, or should I say, obligation and responsibility, and I think I'm looking forward to continuing the conversation so that we can really address important quality of life concerns, help create a state where all communities engage and become part of the livable Florida. So with that, Laura, I'll turn it back to you, but looking forward to continuing the conversation today and obviously in the future. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Secretary. We really appreciate you being here today and sharing what the department is doing. I wanted to take a minute to say that through the pandemic, we have seen such innovation coming out of your department and across the state to deal with isolation. And I just wanted to give a plug to everybody to go to the Department of Elder Affairs website, to their Livable website, to join their e-newsletter, because they've been sending out e-newsletters that link up to a lot of the different programs that have been happening over the last few months and highlighting some of the age-friendly work that's happening across the state. So it's really a great resource. I will showcase some of that for you on a little bit. And I also wanted to let everybody know that this session is being recorded. It will be available. The slides will also be available. And to remind folks joining us today that we have a Q&A. It looks much like your chat Q&A button where you can ask questions, and we have folks on there looking at that. So please send any questions that you have as we move forward with this session. And again, thank you so much, Secretary. So for those of you that joined me earlier, we're doing an interactive piece of this. It's Poll Everywhere, and it's very easy to join. You can use your cell phone or your laptop. If you've already joined earlier, you're already connected, just open that web browser back up, and it is pollev.com, and friendly is your username. So I wanted to take a minute and hear from everybody on the line. You've heard a lot about livable communities and the built environment and the social environment, looking at housing, transportation, outdoor spaces, social engagement, interaction. And I just wanted to see, what do you think your community is doing well? And if you could, please do that in one word so that we make a really cool word cloud here. I see some that are already coming in, networking, collaborating, programs. Great. Places, placemaking, meals, parks and recreation. And that's a great one. If you want to do two words together, just put them together like that. And collaborating is getting bigger and bigger, which means more and more of you are putting that in as your response. And I agree, during the pandemic, and particularly, we've seen so much collaboration across our communities and at the state level. Parks are getting bigger. Acknowledgement, socialization, Safe Mobility for Life Coalition. I see SMFL. Oh yeah, collaborating is getting bigger. Football, parks. I see an image of a beach, and you can put in images if you're on your cell phone. It will let you do that. All right. So if you are still trying to figure this out, you can go to pollev.com and put friendly as your username, and it'll connect you. And then on your phone or on your laptop, you can add in the responses. However, if you are joining the recorded version, you're going to be seeing the live word cloud here. Great. I'm just going to give everybody a few more minutes because I love this. All right, I see a bike has been added. I can tell we're getting ready to head into football season because that's getting bigger and bigger as well. Yes, having sports. All right. And as a reminder, please, if you have questions, put it in the Q&A. We also have folks in the chat as well. Parks is getting greater and greater. Libraries, museums. I'll give it just one more minute. All right. Well, I love this. I love that parks and collaborating are coming to the top of this infographic, because I think that an engagement and partnerships are growing and growing. I see an image of somebody walking. Music. Ah, yes, yes. Music is so important. Engagement has gotten really big. All right. Well, I'm getting ready to move to our next question. So if you have this app up, just keep it there. You'll have to wait just a minute as we transition over. But now I want to stop and make sure this is in one word. What could your community do a little bit better? Where's an area that you think we could do a little bit more work to make it more livable? And as a reminder, make sure you do that in one word: transportation, healthcare. Transportation is growing. And I think that in housing, yes, those two tend to pull forward. I think that's definitely a challenge we're all addressing across the state right now, and really globally. Biking, cars, walkability, education, senior tech. Yeah, that's really something that I know a lot of folks have been addressing. Affordability, food, communication. There's a lot of, and I think sometimes if you don't do it as one word, it'll break up, but I see affordable here a lot. I'm assuming that's connected with other pieces as well. All right, connectivity, equity, resources, dementia, but we still see transportation and housing coming to the forefront here. And while you're doing this, I just saw one of the questions that was asking about the villages work that's happening with the National Village Movement. And I think that is something with, when you look at livable communities, there are so many different models of what is a livable community. It's truly an umbrella that encompasses a lot of the work that we see are happening across the state. And as Jeff and the secretary mentioned, we always like to point out where there is connection, where there is overlap, where they are both working towards the same thing. So that's a great question. Yes, that is definitely working towards livable communities as well. All right. This is, I love the icons you guys are using. I see a computer access is one. That is a huge, huge issue for sure. Okay. And if we have a minute right now, I don't know, Jeff and the secretary, we have a few questions coming in. If you guys might want to take a minute while we're building out this awesome word cloud, come back off of mute in your video.
Yeah, Laura, I was just going to say the village network that the questioner asked about is a great example of how you build the social connection and neighbors helping neighbors. And I think that we'd love to see more of them. They tend to be historically have been in more traditional older cities where you have dense neighborhoods, and the fact that the one in Orlando has been up and running for a while is, I think, a really positive sign that this could be replicated here. I know one of the questions was about, how we pay it forward in that concept of responsibility. And I think in a lot of ways, within an aging context, the village network is a concrete way in which that happens. I agree that we need to figure out, especially when you think about the folks who are on this webinar, how we make age-friendly something that policymakers are talking about, but also something that residents are thinking about in the way they live their day-to-day lives. And that's one concrete example that that I think would love to see flourish.
Yeah, Laura, you know, obviously it follows on to what I was talking about, that you know, this whole age-friendly process is community initiated and community driven. You know, those communities that have created that village concept have done it because it means it makes sense to them. It's something that community has decided, this is what we want to be successful, how we want to live well. And you know, others can take a look at those and they can adapt, you know, from those village concepts across in different areas, and adapt one that suits them, their own community. And that's the exciting thing about this, is that there is no one size fits all. It is very much a community driven process, as it should be. And that's what makes it so exciting, because of the dynamic, you know, nature of this whole thing. It's living, breathing, symbiotic sort of relationship that we have in creating these communities.
I think, I know one of the other questions that somebody raised was about the social function in aging, and again,
Yes.
that ties to the it ties to the question about, you know, how we get people who are aging in our communities more engaged. And I think that there's a lot of data out there. Certainly, Richard talked about the social determinants of health, but there's plenty out there that talks about how isolation and loneliness are killers, just like smoking and diabetes are. And so I think that the ability to get people engaged in their community is so critical. I don't want to overlook, and I think that we probably as Floridians need to recognize that we don't show up very well as a state on most measures of civic engagement. And I think that a lot of that has to do with our demographics, the fact that we have so many people who came from somewhere else and still think of themselves as being from, you know, whether it's Buffalo or Brazil, in trying to help people think of themselves as Floridians. But at the same time, I also don't want to overlook that when you, I suspect the folks on this webinar can attest, when you look at who shows up, whether it's as volunteers, whether it's as citizens at you know, public forums, whether it's kind of in any sort of neighbor helping neighbor context, you see a lot of people with gray hair. You see a lot of people who are who may have retired from their working career, their paid working career, and are engaging in an entire new life of civic engagement. And I would suggest that maybe our best move is to try to highlight that impact more and that engagement more as a way to help those who do still think of themselves as being from somewhere else to recognize that they can live an even better life by engaging in the community that they're actually in.
I think, you know, with COVID and with this disruption of the social determinants, it really has made us all aware of how critical, you know, human services are to population health. I mean, just as much as clinical indicators. And so I think that's, you know, what's so exciting is that all of these words that are popping up here need to be addressed to ensure that we all can live well in a healthy manner, because to ignore them is detrimental to that health. And I think, Jeff, to your point, you and I have talked about this before, social isolation, loneliness has the same impact on people's physical health to the tune of, what is it, smoking 16 cigarettes a day or something like that? Which, when you hear that, you're like, wow, you know, it's incredible. And again, back to what the federal government is looking at, this increased funding that we've received, a lot of it is focused on using technology to help address social isolation and loneliness. And not just technology, but first of all, you've got to have broadband, you've got to have connectivity, you know, and then not only the technology, but you have to teach people how to use technology. So they're not being short-sighted and sort of just saying, here's a smartphone, have fun. Because if I gave that to my 87-year-old father, he'd throw it back at me and probably hit me as well with it, because he can still throw pretty well. You know, you've got to understand that we have to it's a three-pronged process here. We've got to have connectivity, you've got to have the technology, and then you teach people to use it. And so we are actually looking, and communities have done this as well. Cutler Bay has a great intergenerational program where you have these young high school students interact with older adults and teach them how to use technology and not be scared about it. And that's something that we're looking to make available statewide. And that encourages, obviously, that across generation sort of connections that need to happen for communities to thrive. So it's an exciting time. It's just, how do we actually sort of, as communities, implement and take advantage of the times that we find ourselves in?
Thank you both so much. And thank you everybody for participating in our word cloud. We do this a lot. And I have to say, this is one of the neatest ones I've seen in a long time. And I was talking to Jeff earlier. I am not surprised at all that transportation and housing have come to the forefront. No matter the audience or the discussion, those tend to come out as two of the biggest issues that we all are addressing, even in our neighborhood right now. So that does go across the state. But thank you all so much for participating in this. Just a reminder, we're all here. Please put in questions in the Q&A. We'll have another opportunity to ask some more, and the chat function as well.
Laura, sorry to interrupt real quick.
Go ahead.
I think it's appropriate to mention at this time is, and I saw the word there, equity.
Yes.
I think we all recognize that as we rebuild our communities and we address those social determinants, that we have to do so with an awareness of health inequity and social inequity that existed. And what's the point of rebuilding if we don't know what inequities existed? Because then we're just making, sending good money after bad. So I think that's something that livable communities can do. Take a soul-searching analysis of each community and say, what can we do better? Talking to people who have been excluded. I don't know. I can mean well. I want to address health and social inequity. If I haven't suffered it, then I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what to do. So we need to reach out to those individuals who have had access denied for one reason or another, and talk to them about what they've suffered, so that we can address that. So that's important as we rebuild. Those community members, we all need to talk to each other about how to do this. We can assume, but that, as we know, becomes quite dangerous. So health and social inequities have to be forefront, and I would respectfully suggest that be a bigger word on this excellent graph that you have here.
Absolutely, I would definitely agree. Thank you so much for talking about that. And I would agree. I think that is one. And it's getting larger. I definitely think that, when you're looking at the top three here, absolutely. So thank you. I will, we're going to provide these slides to everybody after the presentation, and I will lock this graph so that we can share the results with you all, so that you have a copy of this as well. All right. Well, I'm just going to go right into spending a little bit of time in this section showing, we can talk about livable communities, we can talk about what it means, but I think most people are like me, and I'm very visual. I want to see, what does that look like when it's implemented in your community? And I wanted to just take a minute to talk about some of the things that we're seeing across the state. And the first one is in that domain of outdoor spaces and buildings. The picture on the left is of a fit park that was built in the city of St. Petersburg. AARP built a fit park in every state in the last year. And although this was the first fit park for AARP to build, it is absolutely not the first fit park in the state of Florida. And what I mean by that is exercise equipment that older adults, people of all ages, can use in a park. We often go to the park, like Jeff said, to help get the energy out for our little ones. But it's also an opportunity for grandparents and children to have an opportunity to exercise as well while they're watching the children. So we are seeing this across the state. A couple of features I wanted to point out here that are so important is that there is shade over that exercise equipment. We are in Florida, and in order to really make sure we're utilizing those spaces, shade is so important. And then I wanted to show another project, ARP. For the last several years, we've been doing community challenge grant projects, which are like small amounts of money to really help move a project forward in a community, a livable project. And a few years ago, we did granted a project in Harmony Park in Pensacola, which is in the bottom of your screen. And this park added musical equipment to their park as a way to try to gather people of all ages and to share in the appreciation of music together, which I just think is such an outside of the box way of really engaging the community. And then on the bottom corner is a picture from the Miami-Dade Age-Friendly Initiative. They too are now giving micro grants to communities to really jumpstart change. And this is a picture of a community garden, which is definitely something we're seeing across the state, because not only does it bring in the social engagement, intergenerational, but it also helps to address food deserts as well. And I wanted to highlight, we have a couple of tools that are available. One is the Miami-Dade Age-Friendly Parks Toolkit that the county puts together to say what defines an age-friendly park. It's on their website. It's a great resource for others to look at. And then at ARP, we've been collaborating with different organizations to put together how can you create parks and public spaces for people of all ages. We did this with the 880 cities. Their logo is, if it's good for an 8-year-old, it should be good for an 80-year-old as well. And then we also worked with another organization to do some placemaking, some pop-ups of how we can do something. You can see my favorite picture is on this is the umbrellas that are making shade in an alley area. That's a really, really low cost way we can not only bring artwork, but make our spaces more invitable to everybody. So we have some more projects that are being worked on this year through our Community Challenge Grant projects that we're really excited to share those with you as well. And then in the area of transportation, I wanted to take a minute because I knew transportation and housing would come to the forefront. We're seeing a lot of work across the state to deal with transportation. I have a picture of a trolley here in St. Pete because we're seeing different modes of transportation, which, as Jeff mentioned, is so important that we have different options and that they're accessible as well. So we also are seeing a trend with more trolleys that are lowering so that when you get onto the bus, it is even with the sidewalk to make it easy to get on and off. We've seen across the state open streets, which is a picture on the bottom, where we're closing the streets to cars and opening it up to people, to bicyclists, to dogs, to every type of roller skater you can imagine. And then on the top left, as an example of micro bench that was placed in an area in Miami-Dade where there wasn't enough room for a true bench, but there was shade. So a micro bench was added so that you have somewhere to sit while you're waiting for your transportation. And then another trend we're seeing is on the top corner here, it looks like a soccer ball, but it's really a bike rack, and adding in bike racks that look like artwork that really add to your community, and then adding in bike fix stations as well. And if you're looking at this and you're like, hey, what can I do in my neighborhood? What can I do in my community? One thing that we really encourage you to do is to check out our ARP Walk Audit Toolkit. It's a really easy way to just walk in your neighborhood and see, hey, can I get across the street in your downtown? Can I easily get around? What are some small improvements that could be made to really complete our streets? And then I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of two wonderful resources we have here in Florida, the Safe Mobility for Life Coalition, which, as a teaser, you're going to hear more about in this series. They have a lot of resources that are really for older adults to help them be road users of all ages. And then we have the Alert Today, Alive Tomorrow committee that is focused on really making the road safer for all people. And when we look at housing, I just wanted to show this picture because it really shows you that we need a change in housing, not just in Florida, but in America. A lot of our houses were built with 2 to 3 bedrooms, but we have a large proportion of people that are living alone, and that we need to really rethink what this housing market looks like in Florida, in our communities, so that we're building more affordable and appropriate housing. And at AARP, we launched a website called Our Future of Housing, and we have a lot of resources there to talk about affordable supportive housing, co-housing options that exist across the state here. Multi-generational housing, we're seeing an increase in that right now. We're seeing a big shift in the US where we have a lot of multi-generational housing happening. And then looking at manufactured and supportive housing. I have two pictures here I always like to show. The top one is of a tiny home community in the city of Tallahassee. And interestingly enough, the tiny home, this is also, it has supportive services, really built as a transition place for folks that are looking to, get a home. So they would come to the tiny homes. But once this was built, there was a large proportion of older adults that were using the tiny homes, really highlighting the need that we need to have more options. And then another picture is in the city of Wilton Manors, Equality Park. They just opened up this new affordable housing supportive unit in Wilton Manors that also has supportive services as well. And you can see just a picture here, but they added artwork all around the building itself. There's artwork on the back of it. So really making it a centerpiece of the community. And as I mentioned, AARP has another article on our Livable site, as does the Livable newsletter featuring this new affordable housing unit. And then we have a couple of resources about ADUs. And what are those? Accessory dwelling units. We have called them granny flats before, but they're small homes that can be attached to your larger house. And these are being used for a variety of ways. Some folks are building them as a place, if down the road you may have a caregiver that they can stay there. We have a really easy way of breaking down what this means, what changes could be made to allow these. I know we've had several cities in Florida have adopted some new zoning laws to allow ADUs in their community. And then we have a video that you can check out to find out more information. And we've talked about this quite a bit already, but when we look at the social engagement, what is happening here in Florida, and the top left-hand corner is pre-pandemic. One of my favorite things to do in downtown St. Pete is where we can all gather and watch a movie in the park. You can see the water in the bay in the background. Things look a little different today in terms of all gathering in public places, but I wanted to show how in Florida, we have really adapted and changed in a pandemic and how we're still connecting. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner, a socially distanced fitness class in Tallahassee, and also Zoom activities happening across the state. I hear every community participating in these. At AARP, we launched a community connections line where you could chat with one another. But social engagement thrives as something that we do so well in all of our communities. And it's been really exciting to see the new creative options that have come out in the past year as well. And then Jeff mentioned this as well. One of the biggest challenges we have with the age-friendly work, and we hear from every community, is the communication piece, making sure that people know what is available, what programs are available, and what programs exist. So when the pandemic happened, this is just an example, AARP and DOEA, as part of Livable Florida, partnered to get flyers out to folks that may not have internet accessibility. There's still so many individuals that do not have access. So we wanted to make sure that the information we were learning, this first one was when the pandemic started. What does it mean? How to stay safe? That they were receiving that if they were not connected to the TV. And then also provide them information when the vaccines rolled out. How can you get this? Where can you locate? Who can you call if you don't have internet access? And I think that is always something that's important to keep at the front of your mind when you're talking about this, is making sure that the communication is coming out in multiple ways. And I mentioned our Community Challenge grant projects earlier. I love this graphic. As I mentioned, these are small grants that are really meant to help make change. And we found out from 2020, the previous projects, that over 80% of the projects did in fact help make some policy changes, helped implement some of these temporary pop-ups. And you can see 428 gardens were built over the life of this grant cycle we've been doing. We've had 26 fix-it stations mounted, 124 transportation access and safety trainings, murals painted, volunteers engaged, healthy living programs. So really all the different pieces of what makes a livable community. And as I mentioned, we have 7 projects that were funded here in Florida. You can find those on our website as they're being implemented right now. And all of the resources I mentioned, and I'll stop again to say that we will make these slides available. We're recording this so you can watch later, but all of the things that I've mentioned, we have resources at our aarp.org/livable. We just developed a series of 6 trainings about what is livable communities. And I don't always say, hey, tune into a training, but they're really good. They're interactive. There's quizzes. So it keeps you engaged throughout the training. So I suggest if you want to know more from today, you can find those as well on our Livable site. And then if you're listening to this and you say, hey, I want to see what my community looks like, we developed a livability index that's based on these 7 different areas. And it looks at national data. So you may look at your community and say, hey, but we're doing really well with our fitness classes, and it may not show up here. So keep that in mind. But you can type in the address for your house and it will give you a score all the way down to your neighborhood. You can look at your city, you can look at your county, and at the state. So a little bit of homework after this, if you want to see how you're doing, go and spend a little bit of time. You can compare neighborhoods, cities, counties, and states as well. So I want to stop and say, we just looked at a lot of different things that are happening across the state that many of you are doing really, really well. What is something that you heard about today, or something that a passion of yours that you would like to see in your community? What is something you would like to implement in your community? And this is a reminder for everybody to please pull out your cell phone or your computer and go to our pollev.com/friendly is the username. And this question will pop up right now. So what is something that you heard today that you would like in your community? And as a reminder, if you do 2 words, put them together so they show up together. Exactly. This one is a list, so it's not a word cloud. Yes, community garden. That would have been mine as well. Accessory dwelling units, park improvements. And you can write out a sentence because this one is not a word cloud. So feel free to, you can write a little bit more than we did previously. Yeah, the community gardens are such great ways to have that interaction, intergenerational interaction, shade cover for benches. Yes. Yes. Walkability of streets. And if you heard of, you listened to me talk about ADUs, we also have a guide that shows different zoning things that you can implement to make those happen. So there's one that's just for us that are not planners. And then there is another version that's really for your planners in your city. Closed roads. One thing that was, really interesting to see coming out of the pandemic is we saw so many areas closing their roads and opening them up to restaurants so that you can sit out in the parking areas during the pandemic to really open up those streets. Walkability, charging stations, parks, art displays, yes. Social determinants, internet hubs. And I want to take a minute about the social determinants. In this series, our next session, we're going to hear about a pilot that happened in Florida that really linked the work that's happening through the departments of health with age-friendly communities, and hear from a couple of communities across the state that are also working with dementia care and cure initiatives. So really linking those social determinants together. Yes, the age-friendly buses are really great. More shade for walkers, bikers, and the bus for everybody. Yes, more park-friendly areas. Education on ageism, absolutely. All right, so I'm gonna move on to the next question we have. Oh, we're moving right to Kathy. Dr. Kathy Black, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to turn it over to you. Kathy has, as for everybody's background, Dr. Black led Sarasota County's work when they first joined the network. And since then has been working with many of you across the state as you're building out your plans, and has also worked nationally and internationally on AgeFriendly. So thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm so glad to be here, Laura, and to be with everybody, and a 6th annual sharing symposium. And I just would like to, look at that word journey. It's about our journey. Laura, you can go right to our next slide, about our journey. And as Jeff and Secretary has told us, this is really a process. And so it is wonderful to see this movement continue to grow. Jeff has reminded us that this is about community for all people. Richard's reminded us that this is a community for all people to live well and age well. And, we really appreciate this incredible partnership between AARP and the Florida Department of Elder Affairs. You just saw these incredible resources available to help us. As we're reminded, it's really local and how we do make our communities better. And so the incredible aging network and all the great work being done at the Florida Department of Elder Affairs throughout the area agencies on aging. And one word I heard a lot about today was equity. And I'm glad that people brought it up, and you'll hear more about it in our session on September 9th with health and well-being. But, for everybody to age well, we all enter into these older ages through a variety of factors and circumstances that cumulatively shape us, but yet we're all parts of different pieces. And so when we think about what, all of these elements, there's just such a beautiful visual here, whether we're from a rural or urban area, whether we're veteran status, whether we're first generation, or which country we've come to, LGBT, our gender, our religion, and of course, very, very big, incredibly, structuring pieces such as our socioeconomic status and our race. Richard talked about our longevity. Yes, the news came out not long ago that we have ticked down 1 year overall. However, Black Americans, it's almost 2 years, and they already had a lower life expectancy. For Hispanics, it was almost 3. So we have a lot of work to do, and this age-friendly movement is it, folks. This is our unifying structure that brings us all together around this common aspect of aging. And I think that's what keeps us all going in this work. So I'm looking forward to more work ahead. Thank you, Laura, for moving to the next slide. So here we are talking about our journey. So where have we come from? Laura shared so much about some of the community accomplishments, and it's really terrific. So my colleague and I, some of you may recognize the name Patricia O. She works quite a lot with the National AARP Network, and Patricia's also a leader in the great state of Maine. And what we did was we said, well, now that the movement is growing and taking, and it's over time, it takes 5 years to get through one process. And of course, we're uploaded over and over again because you can't always do everything in 5 years. So Patricia and I wanted to look at what is it that the communities have accomplished, the American communities as a nation. Next slide, Laura. So a progress report is, it follows from your action plan. So, what were your achievements? And did you, some things are withdrawn, some things are surpassed. Well, it's a living document, okay? We're always, learning and growing as we go along. But at the end of it, we reflect back. And this, just a report on how'd you do? This is what you're going to do. How'd you do? So we did look at progress reports from the communities that had completed a 5-year cycle they had to have their progress report by December 31st, 2019, because we needed to have a cutoff point, because otherwise, they're trickling and you can't keep on looking at this work. We had to have a cutoff for our sample. So what we found was we did identify those reports that were available. As you can see here, here's where we located them. And we looked at 30 communities. Next slide, Laura. And I think this slide is very important because I think it shows you, it really illustrates just, no one size fits all. This is an incredibly diverse movement. We've got communities all across the nation in rural, urban, suburban, of all sizes, with a range of population of older adults. And equally, diverse was the progress report. The progress reports, ranged from 5 pages to more than 100 pages. The communities chose, again, this importance that it's about what your community needs and wants to do. No overly prescriptive process. And so communities focused on anything from just a handful of things to 15 focal areas. Again, depending on where the community's interest and efforts wanted to lie. And not just the areas that they focused on. And by the way, many of them did work with the traditional domains, but some of them, transformed some of those and, created a whole new category or condensed some of them. Again, no one right way. No one size fits all. Everybody can do what works for them. And as you can see, the number of provisions that they did was also quite impressive, ranging from just a handful of things to really hundreds of things. And so, Laura, the next. We look. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, Kathy. It cut out for 1 second.
Sorry, of course, there was going to be an IT glitch. I apologize. So what we did was we collected these progress reports. We did not contact the communities. There was no interaction. We simply looked at what was reported in the reports. And so that was great, but that was also a limitation. And as you can all see from the diversity of the reports, it was also like comparing apples to oranges. We used an evidence-based tool to look at age-friendly community progress, and it directed us to look in 10 different areas, actually 11 different areas. So we looked at the degree which there was political support. You know that communities need at the highest level of municipal support to join the network. We also looked at whether there was leadership and governance. And as you can see there, we found very strong evidence of that. Essentially, all of the communities had some sort of advisory, executive committee, lead committees doing the work. And that also included, the appointment, high-level appointment of some of these roles, for example, an FDE, so that somebody is really overseeing the work that's going to be done. In the area of resources, we also found pretty strong evidence there that staff was provided or that some sort of space was provided. So again, communities faring pretty well on those things. Interestingly enough, we found really just moderate evidence of older adult involvement. And, I want to underscore this for a moment here because, as you heard, both Jeff and Richard talk about this incredible rich resource and civic opportunities for older adults. And the WHO model also explicitly requires the engagement of older adults, not just to be, at the assessment phase, but throughout the process. And we believe, my colleague and I believe, that older adults are actually more involved in the work than was reported in the progress reports. But I think we need to do a better job of that. Nothing about us without us. And just think about where this movement can go if we truly do unleash greater engagement of older adults in this work. Tying the priorities into, tying the priorities into the assessment. Again, some of the communities did better jobs than others there. Just about everybody used the traditional age-friendly framework. On the provisions, we saw incredible work here. Basically, what we saw were people either building on existing work or creating new programs, or even transforming existing programs to now incorporate older adults. And I think more importantly than that, we also saw that the aims of some of the programming that was done, 100% of the aims addressed in some form or fashion, enhancing accessibility and engaging people, which are really measures of equity, as well as some focus on subgroup disparities, which also gets to equity. So we really did see some great intention there on equity. Evidence-informed was also pretty strong, particularly in the tying in what the communities were doing to at least some data to substantiate why we're taking this route. Where we were, again, a little surprised was on the monitoring and evaluation. It's one thing to do something, it's another thing to demonstrate what you've done with it. So we can't measure progress if we don't measure it. And again, this is a continuous journey. How do we demonstrate change? So we need to do a little bit better there. Another great strength, and I think we already heard this today, is on the collaboration. You all know this takes a village to do this work, and not just the high level involvement of the great organizations, AARP, Florida Department of Elder Affairs, but also the non-traditional providers that we're starting to hear about, the arts community, et cetera, builders. This is really where we're now starting to see some greater efforts as well. And finally, when the communities look back at how they operated and what they learned, they haven't done a great job in sharing that. And let's face it, we're all getting better by this sharing. And it really is another explicit expectation of engagement in the movement. And so, look, Patricia and I focused very much and are, applauding our successes. And we're working, we're all a work in progress. So we expect to see even greater progress ahead. Next slide, Laura. And now I'd just like to spend the last moment here reminding you about our upcoming sessions. And on September 9th, again, community health and I'm sorry about that sound, I apologize. The health department in Walton County, and I hope people can still hear me. And we'll also be hearing from several of our other communities on the intersecting issues of health and particularly dementia, as well on September 30th, collaborating on resiliency. You heard Richard and Jeff talk about the great community work we'll be hearing there from even more age-friendly communities, and then topping it off at the end, really where we're moving from here. And you'll hear from our national leaders as well as Laura again, and Secretary Prudom will also be capping off the session as well. So looking forward to that.
Kathy, thank you so much for being here with us today. And I know you put in your previous slide the title of your article that was just published with Patricia O, as you mentioned, who has worked very closely with a lot of the communities in Maine. So we'll make sure that everybody has that that's attending this can see that. And yes, as a reminder, this is just this is session 1 of this series. Another session that's happening we don't have here, and I'll make sure you guys have a link to it, is our national office, AARP, is also doing a 2-day sharing symposium as well. That will be September 22nd and 23rd. And we're going to hear from some Florida communities during that, and the Department of Elder Affairs, who will talk about some of the innovative work that they have been doing. So that registration is now live and available at aarp.org/livable. So please, if you're interested, register. It's all virtual. It's a great opportunity to hear from some national speakers about community connections, and that will all be available on our aarp.org/livable website. And of course, I'm going to go to one more poll everywhere. So get your phones and your computer ready. And you can do the same thing as before. Respond to pollev.com username friendly. But this time, when you look at it, you have the ability to type in ABCDRE. And we really appreciate your response here, as that will help with our other sessions that are coming up. And while you're doing this, I wanted to stop. We have plenty of time right now. Are there any questions in the Q&A that you have for the rest of the panel? And we have our panelists here if you want to come back in case we do have any questions from the attendees. No, all right. And I just want to thank everybody so much for attending today. Like I said, we are going to have more of, we're going to have this saved so that you can share this recorded version with anyone who was not able to attend today. We invite you to please register and be part of our series that's coming up for the next sessions to hear specifically what's happening around sustainability and health. And I see that what we would like some more of are community examples. One thing we try to do with this work is to provide some toolkits and best practices of what others have done that we can simply lift and do ourselves for all of the work, from the action plan down to actual programs that are happening in the community. And some would like a little bit more about our 8 domains of livability. If you're in that category, I really encourage you to go to our website to look at the videos that we have that go into really good detail. We also have slideshows that show pictures and images of what the 8 domains look like in community. And if you have questions about how to join the network, you can go to aarp.org/livable. There's a whole toolkit that shows you how to actually join the network. And in a minute, I'm going to be sharing my email address so that you have that in case you have any more questions. And resources. We have a lot of resources available on the aarp.org/livable website. But if there are other resources that you're interested in and something that you in particular would like, please feel free to email me. Okay, just give that one more minute. And in the chat, you can see how to sign up for the AARP National Livable Communities Workshop. Great. Well, I'm going to close out of here. And this is our locked in responses. I'll make sure everybody has a copy of this in our final PowerPoint. But thank you so much for attending this session today to hear about this journey that's been happening in Florida. And as Kathy mentioned, this is our 6th annual Sharing Symposium. We had our first one in Sarasota with, I believe at the time, there were 12 or 14 communities attending. So it's really exciting to see the statewide commitment and so many communities across Florida that have been working on this for many years, and to see what you guys are all working on now. As you can see, I have included my email address and also Livable Florida's email address. If you would like to join their newsletter, you can also join that at their website. Our AARP National Office also has a newsletter that you can find out more about at aarp.org/livable. And with that, I want to thank everybody for attending today, and we look forward to seeing you in the next sessions.